Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Nintendo Entertainment System. The Nintendo Entertainment System is an 8-bit home video game console that was developed and manufactured by Nintendo, the best-selling gaming console of its time. The NES helped revitalize the US video game industry following the video game crash of 1983. With the NES, Nintendo introduced a now standard business model of licensing third-party developers, authorizing them to produce and distribute titles for Nintendo's platform. It was initially released in Japan as on July 15, 1983, and was later released in North America during 1985, in Europe during 1986, and Australia in 1987. In South Korea, it was known as the Hyundai Comboy and was distributed by SK Hynix, which then was known as Hyundai Electronics. It was succeeded by the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. In 2009, the Nintendo Entertainment System was named the single greatest video game console in history by IGN, in a list of 25. It was judged the second greatest console behind the Sega Dreamcast in PC Magazine's Top 10 Video Game Consoles of All Time. Development. Following a series of arcade game successes in the early 1980s, Nintendo made plans to create a cartridge-based console called the Famicom, which is short for Family Computer. Masayuki Uemura designed the system. Original plans called for an advanced 16-bit system which would function as a full-fledged computer with a keyboard and floppy disk drive, but Nintendo President Hiroshi Yamauchi rejected this and instead decided to go for a cheaper, more conventional cartridge-based game console, as he felt that features such as keyboards and discs were intimidating to non-technophiles. A test model was constructed in October 1982 to verify the functionality of the hardware, after which work began on programming tools. Because 65XX CPUs had not been manufactured or sold in Japan up to that time, no cross-development software was available and it had to be produced from scratch. Early Famicom games were written on a system that ran on an NEC PC 8001 computer, and LEDs on a grid were used with a digitizer to design graphics, as no software design tools for this purpose existed at the time. The code name for the project was Gamecom, but Masayuki Uemura's wife proposed the name Famicom, arguing that, in Japan, Pasicon is used to mean a personal computer, but it is neither a home or personal computer. Perhaps we could say it is a family computer. Meanwhile, Hiroshi Yamauchi decided that the console should use a red and white theme after seeing a billboard for DX antenna which used those colors. Original plans called for the Famicom's cartridges to be the size of a cassette tape, but ultimately they ended up being twice as big. Careful design attention was paid to the cartridge connectors, since loose and faulty connections often plagued arcade machines, as it necessitated taking 60 connection lines for the memory and expansion. Nintendo decided to produce their own connectors in-house rather than use ones from an outside supplier. The controllers were hardwired to the console with no connectors for cost reasons. The gamepad controllers were more or less copied directly from the Game & Watch machines. Although the Famicom design team originally wanted to use arcade-style joysticks, even taking apart ones from American game consoles to see how they worked, there were concerns regarding the durability of the joystick design, and that children might step on joysticks left on the floor. Katsuya Nakawaka attached a Game & Watch D-pad to the Famicom prototype and found that it was easy to use and caused no discomfort. Ultimately though, They installed a 15-pin expansion port on the front of the console so that an optional arcade-style joystick could be used. Uemura added an eject lever to the cartridge slot, which was not really necessary, but he felt that children could be entertained by pressing it. He also added a microphone to the second controller with the idea that it could be used to make players' voices sound through the TV speaker. Release. The console was released on July 15, 1983 as the Family Computer for 14,800 yen alongside 3 ports of Nintendo's successful arcade games Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., and Popeye. The Famicom was slow to gather momentum. A bad chipset caused the initial release of the system to crash. Following a product recall and a reissue with a new motherboard, the Famicom's popularity soared, becoming the best-selling game console in Japan by the end of 1984. Encouraged by this success, Nintendo turned its attention to the North American market, entering into negotiations with Atari to release the Famicom under Atari's name as the Nintendo Advanced Video Gaming System. The deal was set to be finalized and signed at the Summer Consumer Electronics Show in June 1983. However, Atari discovered at that show that its competitor Coleco was illegally demonstrating its Coleco Adam computer with Nintendo's Donkey Kong game. This violation of Atari's exclusive license with Nintendo to publish the game for its own computer systems delayed the implementation of Nintendo's game console marketing contract with Atari. Atari's CEO Ray Kassa was fired the next month, so the deal went nowhere, and Nintendo decided to market its system on its own. Subsequent plans to market a Famicom console in North America featuring a keyboard, cassette data recorder, wireless joystick controller, and a special basic cartridge under the name of Nintendo Advanced Video System likewise never materialized. By the beginning of 1985, the Famicom had sold more than 2.5 million units in Japan, and Nintendo soon announced plans to release it in North America as the Advanced Video Entertainment System that same year. The American video game press was skeptical that the console could have any success in the region, with the March 1985 issue of Electronic Games magazine stating that the video game market in America has virtually disappeared, and that this could be a miscalculation on Nintendo's part. At June 1985's Consumer Electronics Show, Nintendo unveiled the American version of its Famicom, with a new case redesigned by Lance Barr and featuring a zero insertion force cartridge slot. This is the system which would eventually be officially deployed as the Nintendo Entertainment System, or the colloquial NES. Nintendo seeded these first systems to limited American test markets starting in New York City on October 18, 1985, and following up with a full-fledged North American release in February of the following year. The nationwide release was in September 1986. Nintendo released 17 launch titles: 10-Yard Fight, Baseball, CLU Land, Duck Hunt, Excitebike, Golf, Gyromite, Hogan's Alley, Ice Climber, Kung Fu, Pinball, Soccer, Stack Up, Tennis, Wild Gunman, Wrecking Crew, and Super Mario Bros. Some varieties of these launch games contained Famicom chips with an adapter inside the cartridge so they would play on North American consoles, which is why the title screen of Gyromite has the Famicom title, Robot Gyro, and the title screen of Stack Up has the Famicom title, Robot Block, an accessory for the NES 1985 launch. Although it ended up having a short product lifespan, ROB was initially used to market the NES as novel and sophisticated compared to previous game consoles. The system's launch represented not only a new product, but also a reframing of the severely damaged home video game market. The video game market crash of 1983 had occurred in large part due to a lack of consumer and retailer confidence in video games, which had been partially due to confusion and misrepresentation in video game marketing. Prior to the NES, the packaging of many video games presented bombastic artwork which exaggerated the graphics of the actual game. In terms of product identity, a single game such as Pac-Man would appear in many versions on many different game consoles and computers, with large variations in graphics, sound, and general quality between the versions. In stark contrast, Nintendo's marketing strategy aimed to regain consumer and retailer confidence by delivering a singular platform whose technology was not in need of exaggeration and whose qualities were clearly defined. To differentiate Nintendo's new home platform from the perception of a troubled and shallow video game market, the company freshened its product nomenclature and established a strict product approval and licensing policy. The overall system was referred to as an entertainment system, instead of a video game system, which was centered upon a machine called a controller, instead of a console, and which featured software cartridges called game packs, instead of video games. To deter production of games which had not been licensed by Nintendo, and to prevent copying, the 10NES lockout chip system acted as a lock and key coupling of each game pack and control deck. The packaging of the launch lineup of NES games bore pictures of close representations of actual on-screen graphics, to reduce consumer confusion. Symbols on the game's packaging clearly indicated the genre of the game. A seal of quality was printed on all licensed game and accessory packaging. The initial seal stated, "This seal is your assurance that Nintendo has approved and guaranteed the quality of this product." This text was later changed to "Official Nintendo Seal of Quality." Unlike with the Famicom, Nintendo of America marketed the console primarily to children, instituting a strict policy of censoring profanity, sexual, religious, or political content. The most famous example was Lucasfilm's attempts to port the comedy horror game Maniac Mansion to the NES, which Nintendo insisted be considerably watered down. Nintendo of America continued their censorship policy until 1994. With the advent of the Entertainment Software Rating Board system, the optional Robotic Operating Buddy, or ROB, was a part of a marketing plan to portray the NES technology as being novel and sophisticated when compared to previous game consoles, and to portray its position as being within reach of the better established toy market. While at first, the American public exhibited limited excitement for the console itself, peripherals such as the light gun and ROB attracted extensive attention. In Europe, Australia, and Canada, the system was released to two separate marketing regions. The first consisted of mainland Europe, where distribution was handled by a number of different companies, with Nintendo responsible for most cartridge releases. Most of this region saw a 1986 release. The following year Mattel handled distribution for the second region, consisting of the United Kingdom, Ireland, Canada, Italy, Australia, and New Zealand. Not until the 1990s did Nintendo's newly created European branch direct distribution throughout Europe. For its complete North American release, the Nintendo Entertainment System was progressively released over the ensuing years in 4 different bundles: the Deluxe Set, the Control Deck, the Action Set, and the Power Set. The deluxe set, retailing at, included ROB, a light gun called the NES Zapper, 2 controllers, and 2 game packs, Gyromite, and Duck Hunt. The basic set, retailing it with no game, and bundled with Super Mario Bros. The action set, retailing in 1988 for, came with the control deck, 2 game controllers, and NES Zapper, and a dual game pack containing both Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt. In 1989, the power set included the console, 2 game controllers, and NES Zapper, a power pad, and a triple game pack containing Super Mario Bros., Duck Hunt, and World Class Track Meet. In 1990, a sports set bundle was released, including the console, a NES satellite infrared wireless multi-tap adapter, 4 game controllers, and a dual game pack containing Super Spike V-Ball and Nintendo World Cup. 2 more bundle packages were later released using the original model NES console. The Challenge set of 1992 included the console, 2 controllers, and a Super Mario Bros. 3 game pack, for a retail price of. The basic set, first released in 1987, was repackaged for a retail. It included only the console and 2 controllers, and no longer was bundled with a cartridge. Instead, it contained a book called The Official Nintendo Player's Guide, which contained detailed information for every NES game made up to that point. Finally, the console was redesigned for both the North American and Japanese markets as part of the final Nintendo release bundle package. The package included the new style NES 101 console, and 1 redesigned, Dogbone, game controller, released in October 1993 in North America. This final bundle retailed for, and remained in production until the discontinuation of the NES in 1995. Reception. By 1988, industry observers stated that the NES popularity had grown so quickly that the market for Nintendo cartridges was larger than that for all home computer software. Compute reported in 1989 that Nintendo had sold 7 million NES systems in 1988. Almost as many as the number of Commodore 64s sold in its first 5 years. Computer game makers are scared stiff, the magazine said, stating that Nintendo's popularity caused most competitors to have poor sales during the previous Christmas and resulted in serious financial problems for some. In June 1989, Nintendo of America's Vice President of Marketing Peter Main said that the Famicom was present in 37% of Japan's households. By 1990, 30% of American households owned the NES, compared to 23% for all personal computers. By 1990, the NES had outsold all previously released consoles worldwide. The slogan for this brand was "It can't be beaten." In Europe and South America, the NES was outsold by Sega's Master System, while the Nintendo Entertainment System was not available in the Soviet Union. As the 1990s dawned, gamers predicted that competition from technologically superior systems such as the 16-bit Sega Mega Drive Genesis would mean the immediate end of the NES's dominance. Instead, during the first year of Nintendo's successor console, the Super Famicom, the Famicom remained the second highest-selling video game console in Japan, outselling the newer and more powerful NEC PC Engine and Sega Mega Drive by a wide margin. The console remained popular in Japan and North America until late 1993, when the demand for new NES software abruptly plummeted. The final Famicom game released in Japan is Takahashi Meijin no Bokenjima IV, while in North America, Wario's Woods is the final licensed game. The last game to be released in Europe was The Lion King in 1995. In the wake of ever-decreasing sales and the lack of new software titles, Nintendo of America officially discontinued the NES by 1995. Nintendo kept producing new Famicom units in Japan until September 25, 2003, and continued to repair Famicom consoles until October 31, 2007, attributing the discontinuation of support to insufficient supplies of parts. Legacy. The NES was released after the video game crash of the early 1980s, when many retailers and adults regarded electronic games as a passing fad, so many believed at first that the NES would soon fade. Before the NES, Famicom, Nintendo was known as a moderately successful Japanese toy and playing card manufacturer. But the popularity of the NES, Famicom helped the company grow into an internationally recognized name almost synonymous with video games and set the stage for Japanese dominance of the video game industry. With the NES, Nintendo also changed the relationship between console manufacturers and third-party software developers by restricting developers from publishing and distributing software without licensed approval. This led to high-quality software titles, which helped change the attitude of a public that had grown weary from poorly produced titles. For earlier game systems, the NES hardware was also very influential. Nintendo chose the name Nintendo Entertainment System for the US market, and redesigned the system so it would not give the appearance of a child's toy. The front-loading cartridge input allowed it to be used more easily in a TV stand with other entertainment devices, such as a videocassette recorder. The system's hardware limitations led to design principles that still influence the development of modern video games. Many prominent game franchises originated on the NES, including Nintendo's own Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda and Metroid, Capcom's Mega Man franchise, Konami's Castlevania franchise, Square's Final Fantasy, and Enix's Dragon Quest franchises. NES imagery, especially its controller, has become a popular motif for a variety of products, including Nintendo's own Game Boy Advance. Clothing, accessories, and food items adorned with NES-themed imagery are still produced and sold in stores. On July 14, 2016, Nintendo announced the November 2016 launch of a miniature replica of the NES, titled Nintendo Entertainment System, NES Classic Edition in the United States, and Nintendo Classic Mini, Nintendo Entertainment System in Europe and Australia. The console includes 30 permanently inbuilt games from the vintage NES library, including the Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda series. The system features HDMI display output and a new replica controller, which can also connect to the Wii Remote for use with Virtual Console games. It was discontinued in North America on April 13, 2017, and worldwide on April 15, 2017. Discontinuation. On August 14, 1995, Nintendo discontinued the Nintendo Entertainment System in both North America and Europe. The Famicom was originally discontinued in September 2003. Nintendo offered repair service for the Famicom in Japan until 2007. Games. The Nintendo Entertainment System offered a number of groundbreaking titles. Super Mario Bros. Pioneered side-scrollers, while The Legend of Zelda helped popularize battery-backed save functionality. Game Pack. The NES uses a 72-pin design, as compared with 60 pins on the Famicom. To reduce costs, and inventory. Some early games released in North America were simply Famicom cartridges attached to an adapter to fit inside the NES hardware. Originally, NES cartridges were held together with 5 small slotted screws. Games released after 1987 were redesigned slightly to incorporate 2 plastic clips molded into the plastic itself, removing the need for the top 2 screws. The back of the cartridge bears a label with handling instructions. Production and software revision codes were imprinted as stamps on the back label to correspond with the software version and producer. All licensed NTSC and PAL cartridges are a standard shade of gray plastic, with the exception of The Legend of Zelda and Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, which were manufactured in gold plastic carts. Unlicensed carts were produced in black, robin egg blue, and gold, and are all slightly different shapes than standard NES cartridges. Nintendo also produced yellow plastic carts for internal use at Nintendo service centers. Although these test carts were never made available for purchase. All licensed US cartridges were made by Nintendo, Konami and Acclaim. For promotion of DuckTales Remastered, Capcom sent 150 limited edition gold NES cartridges with the original game, featuring the remastered art as the sticker, to different gaming news agencies. The instruction label on the back included the opening lyric from the show's theme song, "Life is Like a Hurricane." Japanese cartridges are shaped slightly differently. Unlike NES games, official Famicom cartridges were produced in many colors of plastic. Adapters, similar in design to the popular accessory Game Genie, are available that allow Famicom games to be played on a NES. In Japan, several companies manufactured the cartridges for the Famicom. This allowed these companies to develop their own customized chips designed for specific purposes, such as chips that increase the quality of sound in their games. Third-party licensing. Nintendo's near monopoly on the home video game market left it with a degree of influence over the industry. Unlike Atari, which never actively courted third-party developers, Nintendo had anticipated and encouraged the involvement of third-party software developers strictly on Nintendo's terms. Some of the Nintendo platform control measures were adopted by later console manufacturers such as Sega, Sony, and Microsoft, although not as stringent. To this end, a 10NES authentication chip was placed in every console, and another was placed in every officially licensed cartridge. If the console's chip could not detect a counterpart chip inside the cartridge, the game would not load. Nintendo portrayed these measures as intended to protect the public against poor-quality games, and placed a golden seal of approval on all licensed games released for the system. Nintendo was not as restrictive as Sega, which did not permit third-party publishing until Mediagenic in late summer 1988. Nintendo's intention was to reserve a large part of NES game revenue for itself. Nintendo required that it be the sole manufacturer of all cartridges, and that the publisher had to pay in full before the cartridges for that game be produced. Cartridges could not be returned to Nintendo, so publishers assumed all the risk. As a result, some publishers lost more money due to distressed sales of remaining inventory at the end of the NES era than they ever earned in profits from sales of the games. Because Nintendo controlled the production of all cartridges, it was able to enforce strict rules on its third-party developers, which were required to sign a contract by Nintendo that would obligate these parties to develop exclusively for the system, order at least 10,000 cartridges, and only make 5 games per year. A 1988 shortage of DRAM and ROM chips also reportedly caused Nintendo to only permit 25% of publishers' requests for cartridges. This was an average figure, with some publishers receiving much higher amounts, and others almost none. GameSpy noted that Nintendo's ironclad terms made the company many enemies during the 1980s. Some developers tried to circumvent the 5-game limit by creating additional company brands like Konami's Ultra Games label. Others tried circumventing the 10 NES chip. Nintendo was accused of antitrust behavior because of the strict licensing requirements. The United States Department of Justice and several states began probing Nintendo's business practices, leading to the involvement of Congress and the Federal Trade Commission. The FTC conducted an extensive investigation which included interviewing hundreds of retailers. During the FTC probe, Nintendo changed the terms of its publisher licensing agreements to eliminate the 2-year rule and other restrictive terms. Nintendo and the FTC settled the case in April 1991, with Nintendo required to send vouchers giving a $5 discount off to a new game to every person that had purchased a NES title between June 1988 and December 1990. GameSpy remarked that Nintendo's punishment was particularly weak given the case's findings, although it has been speculated that the FTC did not want to damage the video game industry in the United States. With the NES near its end of its life, many third-party publishers such as Electronic Arts supported upstart competing consoles with less strict licensing terms such as the Sega Genesis and then the PlayStation, which eroded and then took over Nintendo's dominance in the home console market, respectively. Consoles from Nintendo's rivals in the post-SNES era had always enjoyed much stronger third-party support than Nintendo, which relied more heavily on first-party games. Unlicensed games. Companies that refused to pay the licensing fee or were rejected by Nintendo found ways to circumvent the console's authentication system. Most of these companies created circuits that used a voltage spike to temporarily disable the 10 NES chip. A few unlicensed games released in Europe and Australia came in the form of a dongle to connect to a licensed game, in order to use the licensed game's 10 NES chip for authentication. To combat unlicensed games, Nintendo of America threatened retailers who sold them with losing their supply of licensed titles, and multiple revisions were made to the NES PCBs to prevent unlicensed games from working. Atari Games took a different approach with the line of NES products, Tengen. The company attempted to reverse-engineer the lockout chip to develop its own Rabbit chip. Tengen also obtained a description of the lockout chip from the United States Patent and Trademark Office by falsely claiming that it was required to defend against present infringement claims. Nintendo successfully sued Tengen for copyright infringement. Tengen's antitrust claims against Nintendo were never decided. Color Dreams produced Christian video games under the subsidiary name Wisdom Tree. It was never sued by Nintendo as the company probably feared a public relations backlash. Thank you for watching. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Please like and subscribe below. Please like and subscribe below.